Hi foodies! Alright, so today we're going to learn how to make biscuits. Now I know everybody goes, biscuits, those are so hard, but they're really not. There's a few tricks that you need to remember when making biscuits. And once you know those tricks, it's really simple, I promise. Alright, so before you even start to make the biscuits, you need to make sure you have everything in line and ready to go. So my oven is preheated to 450 degrees. That's very important. You want that high temperature because you want those biscuits to bake at that high temperature so they come up nice and fluffy. And I have all my ingredients laid out with a few that I have left in the fridge because you want everything to stay cold. So I have my really nice thick baking sheet here. I like this one a lot because it gives a nice crispy body to the biscuits. All-purpose flour. I don't have self-rising, I use all-purpose just because if I had them both, I'd probably confuse them. And any recipe calls for all-purpose, you just add the baking soda, baking powder, and salt or whatever. Then I have my other dry ingredients. So this is going to be 2 tablespoons of sugar. And I know you're saying biscuits, what sugar? Yes, you need that. And then a tablespoon of baking powder. Not baking soda, but baking powder. All right, so don't confuse those two. They do 2 different things. So this is baking powder. If you can't remember the last time you opened this or you used your baking powder, throw it away and get another one. And then half a teaspoon of salt. And then you're going to need a cheese grater, a cookie cutter, and then we also use a cup of milk or buttermilk or heavy cream. Now I don't have whole milk or buttermilk, so I used 2% milk, and then I added about 2 tablespoons of white vinegar to make a curdled milk, which was like a buttermilk substitute. I put those together a few minutes ago and I'm letting them sit in the fridge, that way they kind of curdle and they get that nice kind of thick look. All right, so all of my ingredients are out. My butter is in the freezer, very important. You need to have very cold butter and milk, so keep those in the fridge until the last minute. I put the butter in the freezer because we're going to grate it and we want it to stay cold. So don't waste your time trying to gather ingredients and letting things get warm. It's just going to ruin your biscuit. All right, so let's get started with our dry ingredients before we add the others. All right, so I'm going to take 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now the nice thing about biscuits is you can make them sweet or savory. You could add a little extra sugar and top it with some sugar and use it for like strawberry shortcakes. Or you can add some cheddar cheese and some spices in it to make a savory biscuit, maybe for a breakfast biscuit or as a side for dinner. It's really up to you. All right, leave your flour out because you're going to be needing it when we roll the dough out. All right, so my flour is in the bowl. Sugar, baking powder, salt, all in there. Then I've got a fork here. Now, no special tools or equipment required for this. I don't even have a rolling pin out. You could use a baking sheet, like this elastic sheet, to roll your dough out on, but really why? My counter's clean. I know I cleaned it, so it works just fine. That's one less thing I have to wash anyway. All right, so all those ingredients have been whisked together with the fork. Now it is time to go get my butter. So I'm going to the freezer. All right, so this is half a cup. 1 stick is half a cup of butter. I like unsalted because I've added salt to my recipe, so I don't want to add more salt to it. So I always get the unsalted version. If you use the salted, that's fine. Just remember how much sodium you're putting in your recipes there. All right, so I just took that wrapper off and I'm just gonna hold it down here as just kind of a wrap around the butter. And we're gonna grate it. And this is the longest, most tedious part here. You could put it in a food processor. I would just cut it into chunks, but the grater works just as well, just a little bit longer and a little less to clean up. And make sure you rotate it. So my mother taught me how to make biscuits when I was young, and those days we used the butter flavored Crisco. Now I know some of you know about that, and it's still in the supermarkets. But today I use real butter. I like the taste of the real butter better than the Crisco, and it's easy to use and work with. Your arm's gonna get a good workout from this. Now, if this butter was not cold and frozen, you would not be able to grate it like this. So it is important that you keep it cold. Now, at this point, once you get the butter grated in, you could stop if you wanted to and put it in the refrigerator. Just mix everything up together. Don't add the milk yet. Just put it in the refrigerator, cover it, and let it stay cold. And then when you're ready to assemble the biscuits, you stir in the milk and then you continue from there. Now, I will say that biscuits don't last long in this house, which is not a bad thing. And there's nothing better than a hot biscuit on a Sunday morning with some butter and some jam on it. All right, getting down to the last part here. Try not to grate your fingers off. Okay, so now I'm just going to scrape, get rest of that goodness off of that grater there because we don't want to leave anything behind. Now you are going to get a little messy with this, your hands, but easy cleanup, right? All right, so you can see right in there we've got the butter. It's been grated. See how it looks, all the little curly pieces there. And we're just going to mix it into our flour. I used to use a pastry blender to cut my butter or Crisco into my flour, but the grater is really so much easier. And it really makes it even sizes. So it's incorporated nicely into the flour here. All right, so we've got our butter in there. Right. Now this is a little bit over a cup of milk. I like to have a little extra because to me it's better to have a little extra in case your dough is too dry than not have enough. I can always add more. We'll see how it goes with that. Just want to stir it. Now you just want it to start coming together. You don't want it to be too wet and you don't want it to be too dry either. So you should see it start forming a ball. And that looks really good. It's starting to come together really nicely. If it's too wet, you can always add more flour. If it's too dry, you've got a little bit more milk to add there. All right, so you see how that's kind of pulled away from the sides there? That's exactly what we're looking for. All right, so next I'm gonna take some more flour, not a whole lot. You just wanna kind of sprinkle it on your counter here. A nice light film, and then I'm going to pour my dough out. And I've never made biscuits with whole wheat flour because why would you? They're biscuits, right? You're not eating it for health. All right, so you don't want to over knead this or overwork it because then it's just going to not rise very well, but you do want to fold it a few times. And I don't use a rolling pin just because I like to feel it and work with it with my hands. And if it's a little too tacky and wet, you just put a little bit. And so I'm just going to lightly fold it and press it and fold it. I just rotated that and folded it again. And then one more time. So what you're doing is you're creating some really pretty layers in there. And I'm just gonna smooth this out. And I like using my hand because I can kind of control it. Not put too much pressure on it to flatten the biscuits out. All right, and then I'm gonna take my cookie cutter here. Now if you don't have one of these, you can use a glass, that works well too. Just dip it into flour. And I generally get about 8 biscuits out of this recipe. Really just depends on the size of your cookie cutter. All right, we're going to take the scraps here. A little more flour on the surface. And again, be really gentle with this. You don't want to overwork it too much, but you just want to kind of pull it together some. So notice it's not real dry. It's still kind of wet, but it's not sticking to my hands. If it was sticking to my hands, then I would add some more flour to it, but it's not sticking to my hands. Okay, I'm just going to press that out a little bit. Now you can put these closer together if you want. And there's always going to be one runt in the recipe here. And one runt being that end piece, of course. It's the one the kids usually get, right? Or that's the one you sample when nobody's looking. All right, so there are my biscuits right there. And now I'm going to pop them into my oven, 450 degrees, for about 18 to 20 minutes. Now you want to keep an eye on them, rotate them halfway through. You want a nice golden brown color. All right, so here they go into the oven. All right, guys, so our biscuits are about done. Oh yeah, looking good. All right, so you want to make sure, yep, nice crispy bottom, and they're nice and brown. Good. And you see they have that beautiful golden color on top, and they've risen very nicely, which is what we're looking for. And now it's time to eat one. This is like the best part of making biscuits, is eating a nice hot biscuit straight out of the oven. And you can see we've got all these wonderful layers right here in our biscuit. That's because we folded it several times and it's given me that nice rise. And all you do is finish it off with some butter and some jelly and enjoy it. So don't forget, when you're making biscuits, it's really not that hard. Just make sure that your butter is very cold. Put it in the freezer for about 20-30 minutes before you make the biscuits. Your milk is cold, and that you have fresh ingredients such as baking powder. Get all of your ingredients and your tools lined up, because once you start, you don't want to stop making it. Bake at 450 degrees until golden brown for about 15 to 18 minutes and enjoy. Well, thanks for joining me and eating with me today, and hope to see you next week. Ciao.